Good evening. I think it's time to introduce me.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for your patience as we work through that, and a special thanks to our IT assistants for finally getting us working. And thank you all for coming out tonight for this lecture. My name is John Crowley-Buck. I am the director of the Arupe Social Justice Scholars Program here at John Carroll University, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Father Timothy Kesicki, a JCU alum, class of 1984, is the rector of the Bellarmine House of Studies at St. Louis University. Before this, he served as president of the Jesuit Conference of Canada in the United States, based in Washington, D.C., where he had responsibility for common Jesuit works in North America, including America Magazine, we might be familiar with, the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, and the Jesuit School of Theology at Santa Clara. He served as provincial superior of the Chicago and Detroit provinces from 2008 to 2014, and was president of St. Ignatius High School from 2000 to 2008 here in Cleveland. He has done graduate work in philosophy, theology, and educational administration at Loyola Chicago, at Santa Clara University, Xavier University, Loyola New Orleans, and Columbia University Teachers College. He has ministered with the Jesuit Refugee Service in Uganda and secondary schools in the Midwest. He currently serves on the boards of Loyola University Chicago, Pine Ridge Indian School in South Dakota, the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation Solidarity Council on Racial Equity. Father Kesicki entered the Jesuit order in 1984 after graduating from JCU, and was ordained a priest in 1994. He has served as a contributor to CNN, NBC News, as well as National Public Radio. And since he is back at his alma mater, we can add that not only has he been to the top of Griselli Tower, he has in fact rappelled down the facade of it, which I'm told was a sanctioned activity at the time, but while he was here as an undergrad. However, he has promised to keep us all grounded this evening. So without further ado, I would like to bring our speaker, Father Tim Kesicki.
Thank you very much, John. I'm so happy to be back home in Cleveland and at my alma mater, John Carroll. And I'm grateful that our president, Nicky Ack, has joined us. Although, as he heard that last bit in the introduction, he's already texted someone to update your liability insurance. I can assure you I will not be rappelling down the tower this evening. The topic is 50 years toward a hope-filled future, so I've become quite popular with these anniversaries, but you already got a little peek. This is an hour when many people are watching game shows, and we all know the beautiful game show Jeopardy. So what I want to do is have us play a little of that to try to get you into the spirit of tonight's talk and to try to ground what happened 50 years ago. The category is Jesuitical, and there are 4 questions. You all get to play, and I'll show you how in a minute. So, we're going to begin with a 100 question. I think it's a $100 question, and the question is this. Catherine the Great of Russia played a noteworthy role in the history of the Society of Jesus. Jesuits will always remember her for this major event. Now, I'm going to give you a choice of 4. The first, founding the first Jesuit school in Russia. The second, helping to elect Pope Julius III. The third, funding St. Francis Xavier's mission to Japan. And the fourth, the suppression of the Jesuit order. And you can either hold a 1, a 2, or a 3, or a 4 in your hand. Hold it up. Let's see how you do. If you have a 4, you won $100. Not for real. But yes, the Jesuit order was suppressed in 1773. And that suppression had to be promulgated. And Catherine didn't promulgate it, so Jesuits continued. Let's move on to the 200 level question. Here it is. There are 27 Jesuit colleges and universities in the United States. This U.S. university was technically not founded by the Jesuits. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1, what is Georgetown University? Number 2, what is Canisius University? Number 3, what is Gonzaga University? And 4, what is John Carroll University? You better not put 4 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, hold your hands up, see how you do. A lot of number ones. Yes, Georgetown University, founded in 1789, related to the suppression. The Jesuit order was suppressed in 1789. Archbishop John Carroll, our namesake, did found it, but at the time he wasn't a member of the Society of Jesus, he was a member of the Roman Catholic Clergymen of Maryland. Let us now move on to the next question. This one was inspired by the noted historian John O'Malley. In 1554, this Jesuit served as regent of Spain, having descended from the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V before becoming a Jesuit. All right. Number 1, Diego Lainez. Number 2, Edward Mercurian. Number 3, Princess Juana. Number 4, Prince Manuel of Portugal. Put your hands up, 1, 2, 3, 4. See how you do, see how you do, see how you do. And it's actually number 3, Princess Juana. This is really an oddity, but Ignatius did give her vows. There were only 2 women who took Jesuit vows. She did take vows, she never married, and she actually ruled Spain for a time with Jesuit vows, Princess Juana. Final question, which is going to kind of lead into our topic this evening. The Jesuit order was founded in 1540 with a global mission. This is the highest governing authority in the Jesuit order. The highest governing authority in the Jesuit order. Number 1, Superior General. Note of fact, Father Kolvenbach was once speaking in this very room in 2006. Number 2, the Jesuit constitutions. Number 3, the General Congregation. And number 4, the Congregation of Provincials. If you want to play, put your hands up, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I see a lot of number 3s. Very good, yes. The General Congregation can accept the resignation as well as it elects a Superior General. The constitutions are set in stone, but a congregation can amend them or edit them, and a Congregation of Provincials is merely advisory. So the General Congregation is what we want to talk about tonight, but I'll first say, did anyone get 1,000? I guess if you got 1,000, you can leave. You know everything I'm going to say. But I encourage you to stay, because I think there's something we can learn. So the General Congregation, the topic tonight, grows out of a Jesuit General Congregation. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you is going to make you a little dizzy, but you'll see why I'm showing you all of them. The Jesuits have had 36 general congregations in our history. We've had 36, and if you think of that, we were founded in 1540. We've had 36, which suggests that we don't meet very often. If you've ever seen Jesuits at a meeting, God, in God's mercy, decided we should not meet very often. The primary purpose of a general congregation is to elect a superior general. That is the purpose, but not every Jesuit general congregation elects a superior general. Let us take a look at some that did not. The 5th general congregation, which met in 1593, was called for by Pope Clement VII. According to a number of historians, there were some issues with the General Aquaviva, and he thought we should have a congregation. The 6th general congregation, a group of procurators who meet before, required it. The 11th general congregation, it was a papal requirement of Alexander VII. And the 14th general congregation, papal requirement of Pope Innocent XII. Now, the next one to meet, and you'll notice, why did he change the color scheme? I changed the color scheme because the XX, the 20, was our first congregation after our suppression. So the Jesuit order, just like there was a civil war in the United States and there was kind of a pre- and antebellum period, in the Society of Jesus, there really is pre-suppression and post-suppression. So in 1883, they had to elect a vicar because the General Peter von Beeks was too ill. In 1923, they had a general congregation because the one prior mandated that they have one to promulgate new laws. 1938, we're in the midst of the Second World War, and our Superior General Letochowski dies. They can't have a full congregation to elect a general, so they elect a vicar to hold the society until they can have one. 1957, they had General Congregation 30. It was called for by the advice of the consult. The 32nd General Congregation, 1975, we're going to talk about that. That's really going to be the focus of tonight's talk. The 34th General Congregation in 1995 didn't elect a general. That was to respond to the revisions in the Code of Canon Law. Now, in case you thought I got lazy making this presentation, and you're like, some of them are Roman numerals, and some of them are Arabic numerals. Did he get lazy? Well, what happened was really up until 30, all of our congregations and decrees were in Latin. By General Congregation 31, they turned English. And I can tell you, once you write in the vernacular, you write much, 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 much more. So the decrees get much longer. So we're going to look at two congregations tonight, 32 and 36. I'm going to start with 36 for one simple reason. I was there. Now, this isn't my travel log. I'm going to share with you my experience of a general congregation, because then I want to explain to you what happened at the 32nd General Congregation and why that historic moment in the history of the society has shaped our understanding of a faith that does justice. So let's begin with the 32nd General Congregation. And images are so much better than words. So let's look at a few images from that congregation. This is what it kind of actually looks like. There were about 200 and some delegates. Someone seated in the center looks familiar to you. That's the first time a pope has ever come to a general congregation, but often we all go to see the pope in the Vatican. These are our representatives that come from around the world. If you want to find me, go to the bottom, count 4 heads over from the right, and you'll see that male pattern baldness that I have become so proud of, and you can see where I am seated. When I said we've only done this 36 times, imagine what it's like to bring this kind of a group to agreement, and you can understand why. The congregation began with a mass, and it shows you how ecumenical the Jesuits are. Seated in the chair is the Master General of the Dominicans, Father Bruno Cadoret. And Father Cadoret gave the opening mass in part because of some historic tensions between Jesuits and Dominicans, but also because we've always looked to Franciscans and Dominicans as our elders in religious life. We accepted the resignation of Father Adolfo Nicolas, and this was a significant event at the General Congregation. And if you're wondering why I appear in so many of the photos, I was a member of the coordinating committee of the congregation. I was elected to it. I can assure you there is no honor in that. There are 6 people on the coordinating committee, and the 6 least popular people in Rome that month are the members of the coordinating committee. Coco loco, coco pazzo, any language they could use to denigrate us, we heard. The congregation elected a superior general. We elected Father Arturo Rossellino Sosa Abascal from Venezuela, although he had been working 2 years in Rome. And the only other thing I will add is the congregation is aware of what's happening in the world. This is a picture of actually, at the time, it was President Obama's ambassador to the Republic of Italy. We went to the U.S. Embassy party because it was the night before the U.S. election in 2016. And so obviously the congregation paid attention to things like presidential elections, and the outcome of the 2016 election did inform some of the thinking at the congregation. So that gives you an image of a congregation. But this was a congregation that elected a general. The congregation we want to look at tonight did not. Now remember, I said most of them we elect generals. If we take away the ones where we elected generals, you can see that there are very few where we do other business. And what we want to look at is the 32nd General Congregation, which took place in the mid-1970s. Looking at this congregation, I'm going to again look at it with images. And the first image is kind of a who's who. The Pope at the time was Pope Paul VI, now a saint. Saint Paul VI, the superior general at the time was Father Arupe. We didn't elect a general, Arupe called it. And there was also another noteworthy person at the congregation, but let's first look at why it was called. This is an image of the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council had a very significant effect on the church, and some of the decrees of the council needed to be appropriated by the Society of Jesus. The congregation was called, in a sense, so that the Jesuit order could respond to all the changes that were happening at the council. One very interesting attendee of the general congregation. You can see Father Arupe in the glasses. In front of him is the provincial of Argentina, Uruguay. And the provincial of Argentina, Uruguay at that time was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who, as we know, became Pope, and the first ever Jesuit Pope. One has to believe that his participation in this congregation has affected his understanding of the church. You look at the congregation, you can see a more modern society of Jesus. So most are in the Roman collar, not all. They're no longer wearing the cassocks, and one suspects that they represented a variety of disciplines. But something else, the congregation is always taking into account what's happening in the world. And in 1975, we were at the peak of the Cold War. I don't know how many of you, I want to ask for a show of hands, remember fallout shelters. But my grade school had fallout shelters. There were these black and yellow signs, they had these arrows, and it was for nuclear fallout. It's where you ran in the event of a nuclear attack. And because we lived in the threat, I chose this image because Russia seems so far from the United States, but if you look at it from the vantage point of the North Pole, you can see the proximity. I'll never forget we once had a drill where we were brought into kind of a boiler room. The kids were terrified. I don't think Gina Lombardozzi or Patty McWhirter of my class ever recovered from that drill. But we know that the Cold War played a huge impact in the mentality of the world. So all of this goes into the general congregation. Now, congregations, when they don't elect a general, are known for writing decrees. And that is exactly what this congregation did. And I'm going to divide the decrees into 4 sets, and then look at the one that I want us to really pay some time reflecting on tonight. The first set of decrees were the society, the Jesuits' response to the challenges of our age. They wrote 4. Second set, we're developing the apostolic body of the Society of Jesus. That was 5. It's more ad intra. The third was witness to the gospel in today's circumstances, again, looking out at the world. And then finally, very internal decrees on congregations and government. We want to look at the society's response to the challenges of our age because Jesuit order is a prophetic order and always wants to respond to what's happening in the world. There were 4 decrees written in response to the challenges of our age, and they are the Declaration Jesuits Today, fidelity to the magisterium and the Supreme Pontiff, our mission today, the service of faith and promotion of justice, and the work of enculturation of faith and the promotion of Christian life. Many of you know the Jesuits today because you often hear Jesuits say that a Jesuit knows that he's a sinner yet called to be a companion of Jesus Christ. That came from that decree. But the one we're going to focus on tonight is the 4th decree of that congregation. Our mission today, the service of faith and the promotion of justice. It's not a very long decree, and you could Google it and read it if you want to read it in its entirety. I'm going to look at just 8 quotes from that decree, and I believe the impact they had in the mid-70s, how I think we should look at them today, and what it might say about our future approach to the service of faith and the promotion of justice. One of the most significant quotes is this one. The mission of the Society of Jesus today is the service of faith, of which the promotion of justice is an absolute requirement. For reconciliation with God demands the reconciliation of people with one another. It's not to say that we were not doing this before. It's not to say that the commitment to the service of faith and the promotion of justice didn't exist at the time of St. Ignatius Loyola. But I'm going to actually focus on one word. It comes in between justice and it's the word is. It's the word is. I don't know how many of you know in the English language there's something called a hendiades. Hendiades is a Greek word. It sort of means 1 through 2. And it signifies those times when we put 2 things together in the singular. So you could go to breakfast and say, bacon and eggs is good. You don't say are. Bacon and eggs is good because they go together. Or you can say room and board is expensive. Room and board often goes together. Every time I say Mass and I say the doxology through him, with him, and in him, I say all glory and honor is yours, not are yours. Hendiades. It's 2 things that are so natural that they take the singular. Well, that's how they wrote this decree. The service of faith, of which the promotion of justice is an absolute core requirement. As if they go together. They cannot be separated, just as glory and honor, justice and mercy go together hand in hand. And this was what, from the outset, this decree wanted to set out. The decree goes on to say, there is a new challenge to our apostolic mission. In a fact without precedent in the history of mankind. Today, more than 2 billion beings have no knowledge of God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, whom He has sent. They feel an increasing hunger for the God they already adore in the depths of their hearts without knowing Him explicitly. So the service of faith and the promotion of justice also has a clear call to evangelization. That we can't sit quietly with the status quo, with the community of believers. We have an obligation to reach out to those millions of people who have no knowledge of God, and that the promotion of Jesus Christ is essential to our mission as Jesuits. The decree goes on to say, while offering new challenges to our apostolic mission, the modern world provides new tools as well, new and more effective ways of understanding man, nature, and society, of communicating thought, image, and feeling, of organizing action. These we must learn to use in the service of evangelization and human development. In the modern world there, it was a little different than it was today. It was television. Television was a game changer. The jet age. Remember the term jet set? No one uses that anymore, but that was big then. Computing. IBM and companies were beginning. They were punch cards, but computing was big. The space age was huge at this time. The growth of the military-industrial complex, all of these things seemed to connect the world and accelerate the development of peoples in ways that the congregation thought needed deeper soul-searching and reflection. It went on to say, there are millions of men and women in our world, specific people with names and faces, who are suffering from poverty and hunger, from the unjust distribution of wealth and resources, from the consequences of racial, social, and political discrimination. Not only the quality of life, but human life itself is under constant threat. It is becoming more and more clear that despite the opportunities offered by an ever more serviceable technology, are simply not willing to pay the price of a more just and a more humane society. And if you think of how at this time they're beginning to divide the world, first world, second world, and third world. First world, the developed worlds. The second world, largely the communist worlds. And the third world, the developing world. That term, third world, didn't really come into being until 1952. There was a French anthropologist and historian who coined the term in French papers. But this is, in a sense, the Second Vatican Council and this Jesuit congregation are beginning to address the society's need to respond, especially to the developing world. The document goes on to say, the secularization of man and the world takes forms in different groups, classes, ages, and parts of the world. And all its forms offer challenges to the preaching of the gospel, to which there is no ready-made answer. This is a significant statement, saying that there is no ready-made answer, because the decree from the congregation suggests that this can't just be a top-down approach. While the decree sets the conversation, it requires context. It requires enculturation. There is a German term for studying scripture, Sitz im Leben, your situation in life, that would have to be studied locally, that we would have to take this decree and experience it and discuss it within our own cities, within our own communities, as well as how everything related to the broader world. The congregation goes on to say, we must bear in mind, however, that our efforts to promote justice and human freedom on the societal and structural level, necessary though they are not sufficient of themselves. Injustice must be attacked at its roots, which are in the human heart, by transforming those attitudes and habits which beget injustice and foster the structures of oppression. And this was, in a sense, introducing something called structural sin, a sin that's not just one individual's wrongdoing, but collectively, how as a society are we responsible? You began to hear terms sins of commission and sins of omission. Sins of commission are obviously the things we do that are wrong. Things of omission are the problems in the world that we choose to ignore, and we know what many of those are. This was a central theme of the congregation. The congregation said we cannot be excused from making the most rigorous possible political and social analysis of our situation. This will require the utilization of various sciences, sacred and profane, and of the various disciplines, speculative and practical, and all the demands intense and specialized studies. Nothing should excuse us either from undertaking a searching discernment into our situation from the pastoral and apostolic point of view. From analysis and discernment will come committed action. From the experience of action will come insight into how to proceed further. Around this time, you really did begin to see Jesuits take on a lot of different degrees, more becoming in the social sciences, whether it was sociology, economics, anthropology, more in the hard sciences, more in mathematics. The idea was we have to be scholars in the world so that we can understand the complexities which try to help answer the question, how does faith promote justice? And finally, the last quote from the decree that I want to highlight, the service of faith. And this is so essential because none of it makes sense without this. The life we lead, the faith understanding we have of it, and the personal relationship to Christ, which should be at the heart of all we do, are not three separate realities to which correspond three separate apostolates. To promote justice, to proclaim faith, and to lead others to a personal encounter with Christ are three inseparable elements that make up the whole of our apostolate. And I highlight this one and save it for the end because it really is a fundamental goal of Jesuit education, of Jesuit apostolic ministry, of Jesuit parish life, of Jesuit retreat ministry, of everything we do, that it requires all three. It does require the intellect. It does require faith, but it also requires that personal, spiritual commitment to Jesus Christ. Now, I'm going to give you a little break from my voice for a minute, and I'm hoping the audio works, although the images will be fine. Father Arupe was the superior general, and his name is very well known. Father Arupe was the superior general who really helped to promulgate this very major decree in 1975. 4 years later, he began to notice the plight of what was called the Vietnamese boat people. And he said, if we're going to be faithful to this decree, we have to respond to that. And he created something, and I'm just going to show a quick video to show just a little image of Father Arupe and how he chose to implement this decree in his own apostolic witness. Many who knew Father Arupe said, of all of his accomplishments, he held his creation of Jesuit refugee service very close to his heart because he felt that this was a very tangible and concrete way in which the Society of Jesus could be true to its own decree on the service of faith and the promotion of justice. We know that actually before this general congregation, Father Rupe is perhaps known for something even more significant to institutions like John Carroll, St. Ignatius High School, Walsh Jesuit High School. He said today's prime educational objective must be to form men and women for others who could not even conceive of love of God, which does not include love for the least of their neighbors. And he grounded that this must be modeled after the person, the man for others, Jesus Christ. So Father Arupe's own personal vision and his leadership at that time when the Jesuits met in the 32nd General Congregation very much shaped our mission today. You didn't invite me here just to talk about the past. When Ed Peck called me, he said, all right, it's 50 years later. Where were we in 1975? Where are we in 2025? What does that say about who we are as a Jesuit university? So we know that in 1975, that was a strong shift, that service of faith and the promotion of justice. The linking them so explicitly represented something significant for the church. As I look at it now, one of the challenges we've seen over 50 years is sometimes it seems to become an either-or proposition. Either I'm more committed to the service of faith, or I'm more committed to the promotion of justice. When I was conference president, I frequently went to meetings in Rome in our general curia and with Jesuits from around the world. And I'll never forget a group of German Jesuits telling me about students at their schools. They said, a lot of the students actually like the church. They think the church is a reputable organization. They think it does a lot of good in Germany and around the world, and they support it. They don't believe in God. They don't understand the theistic aspect of religion. But they think as an organization, it's pretty good. That's what I call an either-or proposition. It can't be either-or. As I said at the beginning, it has to be a both and. And I'm now rector of a house of studies where young Jesuits are learning, and they're very intent about understanding the Catholic faith. And they recognize sometimes when they encounter those who seem to love the Catholic faith but care little or nothing for their neighbor. Once again, the challenge of an either-or proposition. The decree required both the service of faith and the promotion of justice. Sometimes it's easy to skew toward one or the other. They're inexplicably intertwined. When we look at those with no knowledge of God, at the time of the General Congregation in 1975, they put that number at 2 billion. I don't even know how anyone would calculate that number. Instead, I put words: disaffiliation, disinterest. The Center for Applied Study of Research in the Apostolate, CAR, as it's called, is an institute at Georgetown University, and they did a study on religious affiliation. The De La Salle Christian Brothers published it in something called Going, Gone, and it talks about nuns. No, I'm not talking about veils. N-O-N-E, those who claim no religion. And it's startling, the number of young people and the age at which they disaffiliate. I always thought disaffiliation might have happened in university or in young adulthood. It's actually happening statistically in middle school and sometimes even younger. Those with no knowledge of God is now not limited exclusively to those mission territories that have yet to be catechized. Those with no knowledge of God can be in our own communities, in our own classrooms, those who have disaffiliated or come from a family where God is a distant memory. When we look at new and more effective ways of understanding, I said the relationship with the modern world in 1975 was television, jet travel, all of those things. Today, I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know, social media, 24-hour news. And it seems that we're facing an unprecedented time where getting attention is more important than acquiring information. If attention takes precedent over information, then it really doesn't matter what the content is or how it's contextualized. All that matters is if someone notices it. There are new, more effective ways of communicating information, but are we really communicating information, or are we just creating a form of entertainment? If you look at poverty, hunger, and depression, the general congregation said that this was integral to the preaching of the gospel. Perhaps one of the most antithetical things to that might be something called the prosperity gospel, the promise of financial and physical well-being to those who have faith in Jesus Christ. There's nothing wrong with physical and financial well-being to those who have faith in Jesus Christ. But any time I've ever had to do, and it's tragic, a funeral of a child with the parents present, how could I ever in my life say, well, faith must not have been strong enough? We have to recognize the hunger, oppression, and suffering that aren't just in the third world, but the people who suffer, especially spiritually or physically, in this world, and ask, how integral is that to our understanding of and preaching of the gospel? The decree said that there should be no ready-made answer. And at the time, I believe that they were embracing the South and the East. The South, because the global South was still being catechized, and the East, as we know, was primarily communist and the Cold War. And they were saying that we had to understand those contexts. A term I use that I think is our biggest challenge today is called the superficiality of globalization. And this isn't my term. The former Superior General Father Adolfo Nicolas was speaking to all university people in Mexico City in the year 2010. And he said, we can access everything and quickly and painlessly with instant reaction. We can cut and paste without critical thinking. We can shout out unpleasantness with headphones or virtual reality, moral relativism, or consumerism. When we talk about no ready-made answer, sometimes because we are so global and so interconnected, we think we understand the world. But if it's only at a superficial level, are we really advancing as a people? Or are we pulling further and further apart? If we look at studying the roots of sin and injustice, the congregation talks extensively about structural injustice and sins of omission. We know that studying the roots of sin and injustice has become more difficult for us now, because now we have to look at our own sins. Almost everyone here knows the crisis of the abuse that we have come through as a church. Many of you know the work I have done with Georgetown University and other institutions on Jesuit reconciliation with slaveholding. And we're even doing work with our history of indigenous schools and the question of assimilation. Studying the roots of sin and injustice is sometimes personal and very, very challenging for us. We talk about utilizing all sciences, both the sacred and the profane. Coming from 1975, that led to the emphasis of academic freedom. And that certainly was in the congregational decree, that we should not limit the sciences we study. But when academic freedom brushes up against the moral tenets of the Catholic Church, we have to ask, how successful have we been at utilizing all the sciences for the service of faith and the promotion of justice? And to what extent has it become a religion in and of its own right? When I look at what I think challenges us today, AI, artificial intelligence, and I am on the board of Loyola University of Chicago, where the board is at presentations, and we look at how AI can help us, how it can help us develop our curriculum, how it can help the school. But we also recognize, what if AI means the death of writing? What if it means the elimination of original thought? We've actually wondered in our house of studies, if someone makes the algorithm to write the thing, and somebody else makes the algorithm to interpret it, and then someone else makes the algorithm to bring it down to one paragraph. Are we learning? Are we just having machines talking to machines so we can show the world all that we can produce? And then I don't know if you saw the movie The Social Dilemma, but I think we know what the social dilemma is. The addiction to devices and the attention that we glean from them. Is that really utilizing all sciences, or is that ultimately a distraction? We talk about faith, justice in Jesus Christ. How important it was in 1975 that faith cannot just be indoctrination. It had to be revelation, that individuals had to know Jesus Christ, love Jesus Christ, appropriate Jesus Christ into their lives. When I look at the challenge, and I'm basing this on a book I read by a sociologist out of the University of Notre Dame, Christian Smith, Souls in Transition. It gives us a sense of where people are going. If I think of how I've read about people's faith journeys, in the 1980s, many of us were reading a book called Habits of the Heart. I don't know if any of you knew it. It was from some sociologists out of the University of California, Berkeley. Robert Bellah headed it. A lot of it was based on the writings of the French political thinker Alexis de Tocqueville. But Habits of the Heart was talking about our collective understanding of ourselves. And then around the time when I was finishing as president of Ignatius and going into the provincial role, we were reading Soul Searching, and that was the sociologist out of University of Notre Dame who talked about how young people are experiencing faith, that they can be moralistic, they can be relativistic, and they can sometimes admit there's a God, but they have no relationship with a God. The books I'm reading now and trying to understand young people is a title called The Anxious Generation, which takes into account so much of what young people struggle with. It's going to require a lot of patience of us as we bring young people into the faith to understand, how do we keep all three central? How do we keep both their intellectual capacity, their commitment to organized religion, and their personal relationship with Jesus Christ? I'm not going to go too long because I want us to have a conversation, but I'm going to look at one young Jesuit's reflection. And this is a Jesuit of the Midwest province. His name is Matt Ipple. He writes for something called the Jesuit Post. The Jesuit Post is kind of young Jesuits in training, right? They're not ready to be published yet, but they publish on this where they give their thoughts. He's reflecting on 50 years of justice in the Society of Jesus, and this quote has a bit of a bite to it, but it's not uncommon where someone young has an impression that has a little bit of a bite to it. Matt Ipple writes, "I'm not afraid of the new world that is emerging. I feel rather that the Jesuits have little or nothing to offer that world, little or nothing to say or do that can justify our existence as Jesuits. It frightens me that we can give yesterday's answers to tomorrow's problems. We do not want to defend our mistakes, but we do not want to make the biggest mistake of all, waiting with our arms folded and not doing anything for fear of making a mistake." I will say, because I want to bring this to a close, and it's important, I think, to have some question and answer and some dialogue. I believe that the decree, the service of faith and the promotion of justice, Decree 4 from the 32nd General Congregation, holds a significant place in the Society of Jesus, and I would say at John Carroll University, in the development of the curriculum and the formation of students at John Carroll University. And over 50 years, I think we can see where we have made great progress and where perhaps we have fallen short. As we look to the next 50 years, and I recognize that other general congregations have written other decrees, how do we hold those three fundamental tenets in balance? How do we form our students? How do we prepare the next business leaders, healthcare professionals, educators? How do we prepare the next parents of families? How do we prepare the next leaders in the church? How do we prepare for those who will carry on the faith that my parents so lovingly handed on to me? These are the questions we face. Let us hope together we can conquer them in faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Kesicki. As you mentioned, we have some time for question and answer. So a great colleague of mine once said, and I will repeat, if you have a question, please make sure it is in the form of a question. And then we would like to start, if there are any students who have questions, we'd like to begin with the perspective of students and then open it up to everyone. So Dr. Peck here has the mic, so if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and he'll come find you.
Brian, thanks for being brave. I was just wondering, could we end with a prayer once we're done?
Yes, we can.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here we go. Father, looking forward, do you see a time where the Jesuits, or in general, we would see such men as the Berrigan brothers who seem to have seized the moment to deal with societal issues?
So the Berrigan brothers, and Daniel Berrigan did die as a Jesuit, a poet, an activist, was arrested. His brother Phil, they were part of the Catonsville Nine, left the Society of Jesus. And their big cause was nonviolence, and they were burned draft cards. This was at the time of the Vietnam War, so that level of activism. I have to say that if you look at the witness of those 6 Salvadoran Jesuits, their housekeeper and her daughter, who were killed in November of 1989, I would have a hard time saying how they were not cut from that same cloth. Recently we had a visit from a Jesuit who's working in Lebanon, and he remembered the legacy of a Father Franz van der Lugt, a Jesuit martyr who died in Syria in 2018. Another Italian Jesuit also missing, again, giving his cause for the cause of people in the Middle East. So we do have those Jesuits who I think put their lives on the line and give that prophetic witness. In the United States, I think we can see that too. Sometimes, though, the prophetic witness can come from teaching high school and the patience of showing up every day and grading and correcting papers, because from that school can come a student who has a cathartic effect on society and the world. I sometimes get concerned when I hear of Jesuits or anyone in the church being labeled as liberal or conservative. I think these are outside terms that sometimes get appropriated in the Society of Jesus. I always like to, the Jesuits I'm forming, I try to say, how are you faithful to the tradition of the church, and prophetic in the spirit of the prophets in the scriptures, to be faithful and prophetic. And so if the example of Berrigan is to say, how is a Jesuit prophetic? I believe that we will have prophetic Jesuits coming into the future. Susie Murphy has her hand up.
Here you go, Susan.
She's going to give you a microphone so everyone can hear you.
So, many people in this room were educated by the Jesuits. Many people for many years, but a lot of us certainly in university. I graduated from Marquette in 68, and what happened for those of us who were, I won't say indoctrinated, but certainly educated by Jesuits, and then there was a lapse where the Jesuit influence in many of our lives just went away. What happened?
Let me ask you, Susie, if you don't mind. So first of all,
You're asking how old I am.
no, I'm not going to ask you that. I can't ask you that. You were graduated at Marquette in a year that is really of no concern to us this evening. So I'm not going to ask you that question, no. But when you say what happened, are you talking about how the world and the church has changed, or fewer Jesuits, or both?
Well, if you got an answer about what fewer Jesuits, then you win the prize. But the church has changed and become impotent in my mind. You know, I mean, it's been absent.
There's no question, if you look historically, the influence of not just the Catholic Church, but religion in the United States was much stronger 100 years ago. And I'm going to cite one thing. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of something called the Hays Code. But the Hays Code really was a code that applied to Hollywood directors. So if you wanted Catholics, bishops, to give Catholics permission to see movies, they had to adopt these codes. So sometimes if you look at movies around the era of the Hays Code, there would be twin beds. And if a couple was in the bedroom, they'd be sitting on the bed, and the code said that one had to have a foot on the floor. There's actually a cartoon image of Betty Boop after the Hays Code where her cleavage goes away. So what I say that to suggest that it wasn't just the Roman Catholics, it was mainline Protestantism too, that had incredible influence in society. Now, we saw that wane. I think the 60s were a precipitous time, and I'm not a sociologist, so I'm only speaking anecdotally, but we saw that wane. And we can see that the influence of the church has changed. So now, if the bishops condemn a movie, that might actually up its sales. I mean, I'm not saying that to chide bishops, whom I have great respect for, but I just think we need to admit that you go from the Hays Code to this. So I think we see that fundamental change. But if you look statistically, there's actually more Catholics in the United States now than there were in the 1940s and the 1950s. So it's not that Catholics have gone away. We're still the plurality in the United States in terms of population. So I think it is an important question. I'm going to go back to one of the lines from the congregation. There's not one answer to it. And I think the danger is if you say, well, if we could go back to this practice of the 1950s or this practice of the 1940s, we could get it all back. And I think the danger with that is something that I would call almost a sense of fundamentalism. If we just go to this fundamental, we'll get it all back. And there are two scholars out of the University of Chicago, Martin Marty and Scott Appleby, who've written a lot on fundamentalism. And they caution that fundamentalism is often a selective reclamation of the past, where I'm only going to take one part of that era. So you want to go back to 1950? Okay. You want to go back to the party line? How many remember a party line? Do away with cell phones. Want to go back to 3 channels on television? Want to go back to midnight where the national anthem played and then it went off the air and you had snow for 8 hours? And I'm making fun of some things, but they're saying if you want to go back, you got to go back to all of it. You, in a sense, have to go back in time. So all I would say is I think there is reason for hope that the church can have influence in the world. There's not going to be one multivalent, there's not going to be one answer, it's going to be more multivalent. And I would say, Susie, we have to believe in ourselves, and that's for me, and we have to convey a sense of hope. I think we have to do that.
Thank you so much for this talk. I'm the director of the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights program here. And I have to say that it was my high school experience at Loyola Academy that led me to see the intimate relationship between justice and my faith. And I've never been the same since, really. It's formed my entire worldview. So thank you for highlighting this element of our Catholic tradition and the ways in which it became actualized in all these high schools and colleges. And so I just appreciate your bringing attention to this crucial part of our education and work together. I was totally fascinated that there were female Jesuits. And as I'm the last person in my, I'll take any. As I'm the last person in my family to be regularly attending church, I have 2 daughters and my wife, I know that the main reason why they've become disinterested is, two main reasons. One, regarding, why would I want to participate in a church that does not see me as someone who could be a priest, essentially? And the other, who's queer, how am I seen in the face of this? And these are deeply spiritual and political sorts of issues. And I just wondered if you had any wisdom for me and for my family.
We had a superior general, Father Peter Hans Kovenbach, and he would always lean in and say, "Thank you very much for this question." And I do thank you for this question, because I think we have to discuss all of this. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on Pope Francis and how he engages these questions. I would say something significant he's done, which incidentally many U.S. bishops had been asking for in prior papacies, was his appointing women to positions of authority in the Holy See. The new prefect for the dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life is a Comboni sister. He has them in the congregation, other women religious in the congregation of bishops. And so sometimes I think we have the sacramental role of priesthood, but also leadership in the church. And I think it's also important that we recognize the immense, even as a child, the immense leadership women had in my own home diocese, overseeing Catholic health care, overseeing elementary school education and others. So I don't think we should minimize the tremendous impact women have had in leadership of the church. But if you look at the term, if you look at equality as other denominations have defined it, it is different in the Catholic Church. There are theological reasons for that, and that's probably a whole other session we can discuss. I believe that the fundamental purpose on the Synod of Synodality was to create a space for these conversations. And if you notice, most of the secular press attacked the Synod, and they're all one-line answers because they reduced it to decisions they expected. The Synod was never about producing decisions, because then that's a top-down thing. It was about creating an opportunity for these conversations to happen. We also know equally that Pope Francis has taken great care, but he's not the only pope to have done so for the pastoral care of people who identify, and we know that whole spectrum now, LGBTQIA+. I can't say that I always know it all. But his approach is not to take into account all of that. His account is to recognize the dignity of the human person, and that all human beings are loved in the eyes of God. It doesn't always equate with what somebody wants to hear at the moment. But I do believe the church's response is always rooted in the gospel. And I think the beautiful traditions of human dignity in the Catholic faith. And we're always growing and moving towards something.
We have a question up here.
So I'm a student of Walsh Jesuit, a senior, and I've somewhat noticed among my peers, also people of faith, this claim of a love of God with a sense of apathy for one's neighbor, especially when it comes to a neighbor who's a refugee and who's experiencing poverty, those on the margins. Do you see the society attempting to address this trend among my generation that seems to be more people of faith moving towards self-interest rather than solidarity, and what those efforts might look like?
Thank you very much for that question. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Yes, obviously, yes, I see the society addressing it, the side Jesus addressing it. But let me say a little bit about how. Sometimes you hear a difference between bringing people in and calling people out. And calling people out is when you kind of catch them or shame them. And I fundamentally believe that if we want to actualize the beauty of that decree on the service of faith and the promotion of justice, it's fundamentally about conversion. That when someone has a conversion of heart, a conversion of faith, when they experience something that changes them, it brings them to be they're less apathetic. There's an important word, I don't know if you know, there's, I think a very important person on racial justice, and that's Brian Stevenson. He runs the Equal Justice Initiative, and I've met with him in Montgomery, Alabama, the Museum of Peace and Justice. He has a special on HBO called True Justice, and he always says when he talks about his work, the power of proximity. He says when people are proximate to human suffering, when they see really that people aren't poor because they're lazy, or they're not disenfranchised because they're not responsible, but sometimes they're victims of cruelty in the world. When they're proximate to it, their care and their empathy grows, the more removed from it we are. And that should be, I trust at Walsh Jesuit, you do have service programs, you do have mission trips. And those are a start, they're not necessarily the answer. But I think the more we can give each other proximity to suffering in the world, the more we can walk away from apathy and become loving as Jesus is in the Gospels.
I think we probably have time for maybe one more question, Tim, is that all right?
Yeah, everyone's on a time frame.
I think I had one over here. I'll use mine.
In the play, The Life of Pi, this young Indian boy, around 14 years old, said he believed in God to his parents, who were non-religious. On a couple streets over, there was a Catholic church, a Muslim mosque, and a Buddhist temple. He went to the Buddhist temple Friday, the Muslim mosque Saturday, and the Catholic church Sunday. His mother said, "You have to choose one. You cannot go to all three." He said, "Why not?" And I started to think about it, and I wondered, why can't he? He's trying to reach God, and eventually he would most likely go with the Catholic Church. I'd just like your comments, please.
Yes, so I think the Pope got into a little trouble this past week when he talked about different religions as a pathway to God, and people said, no, there's Jesus Christ is one pathway to God. So I'm going to use the word communion, okay? I am in communion with the Roman Catholic Church, and communion with the Roman Catholic Church is absolutely receiving, as I did today, is receiving communion. But that receiving communion isn't just receiving the Eucharist. It's understanding the faith and morals of the church. It's saying, yes, I believe in these faith and morals. And I believe, as I've encountered people from other religious traditions or other denominations, that they believe in creed, that they believe in what is revealed in Scripture. So religion for us is not really to separate us from one another as if we're in opposition to each other. Rather, it's a way we move closer to God. I mean, let's look at my Jesuit vocation. Today, when I pray the closing prayer, there's a great Dominican feast day today. There are Franciscans, there are these other entities. I can't be a Franciscan and a Dominican and a Legionnaire of Christ and a Benedictine. I am a Jesuit. That doesn't mean that I'm not in relationship with them. And I feel the same way about the many religions of the world, that we give our heart and soul to one to the benefit of others. We have often found that we don't take only Catholics at Jesuit schools, but we do profess our faith publicly, not because we're necessarily trying to proselytize, but oftentimes a student says, when I see the Catholics at the Jesuit institution strong in their Catholic faith, it's made me stronger in my Jewish faith or in my Hindu beliefs or in whatever tradition I belong to. So that's, I guess, how I would answer that question. One more? Yeah, it's up to you.
No, I was just going to say, did you want to end with a prayer? Or?
I am going to end with a prayer, yeah. I didn't know, I didn't want to cut short the questions.
I have one question, Tim, if I could ask. Earlier today, we had our service awards ceremony. We had a faculty, staff, and 2 students receive service awards. And we asked them to share what gave them hope in the work they do. So could I ask you, what gives you hope in the work that you do?
I'm blessed every time I get to accompany young people. First of all, the fact that you came here tonight, you could have done plenty else, that you came here tonight. The young people I encounter, both within the Society of Jesus and at our institutions, who hunger for what we teach, what we believe, and who hunger for the faith, that gives me immense hope. I always go back to the early church, And you know, the early church, they didn't live with comfort and privilege. They suffered and sacrificed because of their love of Jesus Christ for hundreds of years. And look what has grown out of that. I believe that there are perhaps parts of our world today, and I've listed the challenges that might mirror some of the challenges the early church faced. But I believe in God. I believe in the power of Jesus Christ. And I believe in all of you that we have the faith and the ability to heal the world. So let us pray. Lord God, today we celebrate the feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, doctor of the Church, Dominican priest, the patron of Catholic education, one who has illumined so many of us and helped us to understand scholasticism, help us understand the depths of the faith. We pray in gratitude for his vocation and all that he has taught us. As we reflect on that wonderful relationship between Jesuits and Dominicans, we see how together we model companionship, we model collaboration and colleagueship, we model intellect and love of learning, and we model faith, a faith that can change the world. I ask your blessings on John Carroll University, its students, its faculty, its staff, its alumni. We pray for its service to the Diocese of Cleveland and to the broader church. Pray in gratitude especially for its leaders and its board. We pray that the mission of this institution, inspired by saints such as Thomas Aquinas, may help us all to go forth and preach and teach the good news handed down to us from Jesus Christ. We pray all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Father Kesicki. And thank you to all of you for coming out. Thank you again, Father Kesicki, for being with us. Ed, anything you want to add?
Sure. I just would also like to thank Father Kesicki for coming back and welcome home. I would like to thank John Crowley-Buck, who is the director of the Rupe Scholars Program here. It was really his idea to engage Father Kesicki on this topic. So thank you for your leadership, and also Julia Arnold-Hess, if you're here, raise your hand. You were very instrumental in getting all the details together, so we're so happy for your help and guidance. I'm really pleased to all of the people from John Carroll, my colleagues, and our students who are here, but also our parishioners from Jesu Parish and some staff members from Jesu, a wonderful contingent from St. Ignatius High School and the Jesuit community there, and Walsh Jesuit High School here. Thank you for being here. And I would like you to stay around and have some refreshments outside. Father Kesicki will be around if you'd like to say hi. And as you look around, there's a poster up behind the food station that points to a very interesting 7-part online series that John Carroll is launching tomorrow night from this space. There's a watch party, but you can watch it from anywhere. There will be 7 lectures given out over the course of this year, I think 4 or 5 this semester, and a few more in the fall. And they're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical on the environment and the economy. And the talk on Wednesday night, the series is called Envisioning a Livable Future. And the talk on Wednesday night is about the current state of climate science. So I promise you it is going to be very interesting, very informative. You can watch it from the comfort of your home, or if you want to come back here at 6:30 tomorrow, you're more than welcome to do it. But if you'd like to register, if you have your phone, you can just go to the poster behind the cookies and coffee and register yourself for the event tomorrow night, and you'll get the link to be able to join it, and then you can be connected to the whole series. So please consider that. And thank you again for coming. How about one more round of applause for our faculty?